The Tonight Show studio buzzed with its usual Tuesday night energy as Marcus Thompson walked onto the stage, his worn leather jacket creaking slightly as he moved, and his weathered hands clasped nervously in front of him. At 55, Marcus carried himself with the unhurried confidence of someone who had navigated city streets for thousands of hours, his kind eyes taking in the bright studio lights with a mixture of wonder and slight overwhelm. Jimmy Fallon stood to greet him, immediately struck by Marcus's genuine humility and the way he seemed both honored and surprised to be there. Marcus wore his best flannel shirt under the leather jacket, clothes that were clearly his version of formal wear, and carried a small digital camera and a manila folder that had obviously seen years of careful handling. "Marcus Thompson, everyone," Jimmy announced as the audience applauded warmly. Marcus just retired after 8 years as an Uber driver in Seattle, Washington. Marcus, welcome to The Tonight Show. Marcus settled into the guest chair with a gentle smile, his eyes scanning the audience with the same observant attention he had given to passengers for nearly a decade. "Thank you for having me, Jimmy. I have to say, this is definitely the most interesting pickup I've ever done, even though technically I'm not driving tonight." The audience chuckled, and Jimmy leaned forward with genuine curiosity. 8 years as an Uber driver in Seattle, that must have given you some incredible stories. I imagine you've seen just about everything in that time. Marcus's expression grew thoughtful, and he placed his hands protectively over the folder in his lap. "You know, Jimmy, most people think being an Uber driver is pretty straightforward. Pick people up, get them where they need to go safely, collect your fare, move on to the next ride. And for the most part, that's exactly what it is. But somewhere along the way, I realized that I wasn't just driving people from point A to point B." "What do you mean?" Jimmy asked, sensing there was something deeper behind Marcus's words. Marcus was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Well, when you're an Uber driver, you become part of people's lives during very specific moments. You're not just their transportation. You're often their witness to some of the most important experiences they'll ever have." The studio grew more attentive, the audience picking up on the sincerity and depth in Marcus's voice. Jimmy settled back in his chair, giving Marcus space to elaborate. "About 2 years into driving, I had this young couple get into my car around 2 a.m. The woman was clearly in labor, and they were heading to the hospital," Marcus began, his voice taking on a warmer quality as he recalled the memory. "I could tell this was their first baby, because they were both terrified and excited at the same time. The whole drive, they kept talking about how this was the moment their lives would change forever." Marcus's eyes grew brighter as he continued. "When we got to the hospital, the husband asked if he could take a quick photo of them getting out of the car. He said he wanted to remember every detail of the night their daughter was born, including the ride that got them there safely." Jimmy felt a chill of anticipation, sensing this story was leading somewhere meaningful. "That's when it hit me," Marcus said, opening the folder slightly. "I wasn't just driving them to the hospital. I was driving them to the moment they became parents. I was part of one of the most significant journeys of their entire lives." The audience listened in respectful silence, understanding they were hearing something important. Marcus pulled a small photo from his folder. "With their permission, I took a picture of them as they got out of the car. Just a simple shot of 2 people about to become a family, standing in front of the hospital with my car in the background." He showed the photo to Jimmy, who looked at it with growing emotion. "Marcus, that's beautiful, but I have a feeling this wasn't a one-time thing." Marcus's face lit up with quiet pride and perhaps a touch of embarrassment. "You're absolutely right, Jimmy. That night changed how I saw my job completely. I started to realize that almost every ride I gave was taking someone to a moment that mattered to them." He opened the folder wider, revealing dozens of carefully organized photographs. I began asking passengers if they minded me taking a photo when I could tell they were heading to something special: graduations, weddings, first dates, job interviews, family reunions, saying goodbye to loved ones. All these moments that people would remember for the rest of their lives. Jimmy looked at the collection with amazement. "How many photos are we talking about, Marcus?" Marcus considered the question carefully, flipping through the organized sections of his folder. "Over 6 years of collecting these moments, I'd say I have about 300 photos. Each one represents a ride where I knew I was driving someone to a life-changing experience." The studio audience began to murmur in fascination, and Jimmy felt a profound sense of awe. "Marcus, this is incredible. You've basically been documenting the most important moments in hundreds of people's lives. I prefer to think of it as being a witness to the beautiful chaos of human experience," Marcus replied with humility. "These people trusted me not just with their safety during the ride, but with being present for some of their most vulnerable and exciting moments." Jimmy leaned forward with deep interest. "Can you tell us about some of the other photos? What kinds of moments did you capture?" Marcus carefully selected another photo from his collection. "This one is from about 3 years ago. I picked up an elderly man named Robert at a nursing home. He was going to see his childhood home one last time before the family sold it. He had dementia, and his daughter told me this might be his last chance to remember the place where he grew up." Marcus's voice grew more emotional as he continued. "The whole drive, Robert was telling me stories about that house, about learning to ride a bike in the driveway, about Sunday dinners with his parents, about bringing his own children there for holidays. When we arrived, he just sat in the car for a few minutes, staring at this modest little house like it contained his entire history." He showed the photo to Jimmy, an image of an elderly man standing in front of a small house, his hand resting on Marcus's car, his expression filled with decades of memories. His daughter asked if I could take a picture of him there, and Robert insisted that I be in the photo too. He said I had been the bridge between his past and present, the person who had safely carried his memories back home. Jimmy wiped his eyes, clearly moved by the story. "Marcus, do you realize how special this is? You're not just a driver, you're a curator of human experiences." Marcus smiled, tears beginning to form in his own eyes. "That's exactly what I came to understand, Jimmy. Every person who got into my car was trusting me with more than just transportation. They were trusting me to be part of their story." He flipped to another section of photos. This one is from a graduation ceremony. I picked up Maria, a single mother who had just finished nursing school after 7 years of night classes while working 2 jobs to support her kids. She had no family at the ceremony, so she asked if I would wait and drive her home afterward. Marcus's voice grew stronger with pride. When she came out of that building with her diploma, she was crying with joy. She said she had dreamed of this moment every night during those long years of studying. I took a picture of her holding that diploma next to my car, and she said it was the first photo she'd ever had of herself achieving something she'd worked so hard for. The audience was completely absorbed now, many openly moved by these stories of ordinary moments made extraordinary through Marcus's attention and care. "How did you decide which rides deserve photos?" Jimmy asked. "How could you tell when someone was heading to something important?" Marcus's expression grew thoughtful. "You know, Jimmy, after thousands of rides, you develop an instinct for reading people's energy. You can sense when someone is nervous about a job interview, when a couple is headed to their wedding, when someone is going to say goodbye to a dying parent." He gestured to his collection. "But more than that, I learned to listen differently. Most passengers would share details about where they were going and why it mattered to them. They'd talk about their excitement, their fears, their hopes for how the day would go." Marcus selected another photo, this one showing a young man in military uniform standing next to a car outside an airport. This is David. I picked him up for what he thought was just a ride to the airport for his deployment to overseas. But his girlfriend had secretly coordinated with his family to surprise him with a send-off gathering. His voice grew warmer as he recalled the details. During the ride, David talked about how scared he was to leave, how he wished his family could have been there to say goodbye properly when we got to the airport and he saw 30 of his friends and family members waiting for him. He broke down completely. Marcus showed the photo to Jimmy in the camera. That's a picture of pure love and surprise. David's girlfriend asked me to capture the moment because she said someone needed to document what it looks like when a community shows up for one of their own. Jimmy was clearly struggling to maintain his composure. Marcus, these aren't just photos. These are historical documents of human love and courage. Marcus nodded seriously. That's exactly how I came to see them, Jimmy. Each photo represents not just a moment in time, but a choice someone made to trust me with their vulnerability, to invite me into their most significant experiences. He turned to another section of his folder. Some of the most powerful photos are the quiet ones. Like this one, I picked up an elderly woman named Grace who was going to visit her husband's grave on the anniversary of his death. She had been making this trip every year for 15 years. Marcus's voice grew softer. During the ride, Grace told me about their 50-year marriage, about how she still talked to him every day, about how visiting his grave was the one day each year when she felt truly connected to him again. When we arrived at the cemetery, she asked if I would walk with her to his headstone. The photo showed an elderly woman kneeling beside a grave, with Marcus standing respectfully in the background, his presence offering silent support. Grace said she had always made that walk alone, but this year she was grateful to have someone witness her love. She said having me there made her feel less lonely in her grief. The studio was completely silent now, everyone absorbed in these profound stories of human connection. Jimmy felt like he was in the presence of someone who had discovered something fundamental about the meaning of service. Marcus, Jimmy said softly, what did taking these photos teach you about people, about life? Marcus looked directly at Jimmy, then at the camera, his expression serious but filled with love. It taught me that everyone is carrying something significant, Jimmy. Every person who gets into your car, every person you encounter in your daily life is in the middle of their own important story. He held up his collection of photos. These pictures taught me that we're all just trying to get to our next meaningful moment, whether that's a celebration, a challenge, a goodbye, or a new beginning. And sometimes the person who helps you get there becomes part of that moment's significance. Marcus's voice grew more passionate. I realized that my job wasn't just about driving people places. It was about being present for them during transitions, about offering safety and comfort during vulnerable times, about witnessing and honoring their experiences. Jimmy leaned forward, completely absorbed. What was the most powerful photo you ever took? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then reached for a photo that was clearly separate from the others. This one is probably the most meaningful to me personally. About a year ago, I got a call to pick up someone from a hospice facility. When I arrived, it was a middle-aged man named Peter who was terminally ill. His voice grew very soft. Peter was going home to die. He had maybe a few days left, and he wanted to spend them in the house where he had raised his children. His family was waiting at home, but he had asked to make the journey alone so he could have a few quiet minutes to process what was happening. Marcus showed the photo, a man sitting in the passenger seat of a car, looking out the window with an expression of profound peace. During the ride, Peter talked about his life, about the things he was grateful for, about how he wasn't afraid to die because he had lived fully. When we got to his house, he asked if I would take a picture of him before he went inside. Marcus's voice broke slightly. He said he wanted there to be a record of the moment when he chose to face death with dignity, when he decided to come home and say goodbye on his own terms. The audience was openly crying now, and Jimmy had to take a moment to compose himself before speaking. Marcus, that's incredibly profound. Did you stay in touch with Peter's family? Marcus nodded. His daughter contacted me a few days later to let me know that Peter had passed peacefully, surrounded by his family. She said he had talked about our conversation during the ride about how having someone listen to his story had helped him feel less alone with his thoughts. He paused, then continued. She asked for a copy of the photo I had taken. She said it captured her father exactly as she wanted to remember him, brave, thoughtful, and at peace with his choices. Jimmy turned to address the studio audience. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Thompson didn't just drive people around Seattle for 8 years. He became a documentarian of the human experience, a witness to the moments that define our lives. As the segment continued, Marcus shared more photos and stories from his collection. He talked about driving newlyweds to their honeymoon, taking teenagers to prom, bringing families to adoption ceremonies, and helping people get to funerals, graduations, and first days at new jobs. Marcus told Jimmy, what I learned is that every ride tells a story. And if you pay attention, if you really listen to people, you realize that you're not just providing a service, you're participating in the narrative of their lives. The thing is, Jimmy, Marcus said as they talked, I think a lot of people feel disconnected from each other in our modern world. But being an Uber driver taught me that we're all just looking for someone to witness our experiences, someone to acknowledge that our moments matter. Jimmy nodded, deeply moved by his conversation with Marcus. You've certainly changed my perspective on what it means to be present for other people. In the weeks following Marcus's appearance, something remarkable happened. Uber drivers across the country began sharing their own stories of meaningful rides and significant moments they had witnessed. The Tonight Show received hundreds of emails from drivers who had been inspired to pay closer attention to their passengers' stories. The book became a bestseller, not because the photos were technically perfect, but because they captured something authentic about human resilience, love, and the significance of ordinary moments made extraordinary by someone caring enough to notice and document them. Marcus continued driving part-time, but now he also spoke at conferences about customer service, human connection, and the art of being present for others during their most important journeys. His message was simple but profound. Every interaction is an opportunity to witness and honor someone else's story. That Tuesday night, when Marcus Thompson shared his collection of moments with millions of viewers, he reminded everyone that we are all in transit between significant experiences, and sometimes the most meaningful gift we can offer each other is simply paying attention, being present, and acknowledging that every person's journey matters. His camera had captured more than images. It had documented the beautiful truth that human beings are constantly creating meaning through connection, and that sometimes the person who helps you get where you're going becomes an essential part of the story of how you got there